The Arctic night stretched endlessly over Svalbard, a territory where darkness and silence reigned supreme for most of the year. In the research station, isolated among snow-covered mountains and the frozen sea, Ethan adjusted his thermal coat as he took over his monitoring shift. The digital clock on the wall read 11:45 p.m., and through the reinforced windows, only the vast black and white expanse of the Arctic was visible. The monitoring room was an impressive array of modern equipment: radar screens, satellite communication systems, and weather stations providing crucial data on sea and ice conditions. Ethan knew every inch of that space, every button, and every protocol. After 3 years in that position, the routine had become exhausting, but he never let his guard down. The Arctic did not forgive mistakes, and his role as a monitoring officer was vital to the region's safety. His sharp eyes scanned the radar screens, watching the few blips representing authorized vessels, mainly fishing boats and some research ships. It was monotonous work, but necessary. The region was known for occasional attempts at illegal fishing, and more rarely, smuggling activities. The station also served as a support point for rescue operations, which were not uncommon in those treacherous waters. During one of these routine sweeps, something unusual caught his attention. In the upper right corner of the main screen, an unidentified blip appeared, moving at a constant speed. Ethan frowned, adjusting the controls for a more precise reading. The object was too large to be a system error, and its trajectory was too deliberate to be a drifting iceberg. Following protocol, Ethan attempted to establish contact through standard communication channels. Only silence. He tried again, this time on all emergency frequencies. Nothing but the static hiss of the radio. His experience told him something was wrong. Legitimate vessels always kept their identification systems active and promptly responded to any contact attempts. With his fingers tapping nervously on the console, Ethan called Alex, the communications operator on the night shift. Alex was new to the station, but had prior experience in the Norwegian Navy. When he entered the room, his eyes immediately locked onto the monitoring screens. "Are you seeing this?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady as he pointed at the mysterious blip, now even closer to the coast. His mind was already calculating the possibilities. It could be a ship experiencing communication system failures, or something more sinister. Alex took his position at the communication station, his fingers swiftly running through a series of different contact protocols. "Yes, but there's no response on any radio frequencies," he replied after a few minutes, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sweat began to form on his forehead, despite the room's air conditioning. The two men exchanged worried glances. The protocol was clear in situations like this. Any unidentified vessel approaching the coast without proper communication had to be treated as a potential threat. Ethan knew they needed to escalate the situation. With a quick motion, he activated the station's internal communicator, calling Chief Jensen. Within minutes, they heard his heavy footsteps in the hallway. Jensen was a veteran of numerous Arctic missions, and his presence always brought a sense of security and competence. The station chief examined the data in silence for a few moments, his expression growing more serious by the second. The ship continued its steady advance, like a ghost cutting through the icy waters. There was no hesitation in its trajectory, no sign of it drifting or being in distress. It was an intentional and silent approach. They could be smugglers, or something worse, Jensen finally declared, his deep voice echoing in the control room. His years of experience had taught him that unusual situations rarely had simple explanations. "Assemble a team. We're going out there." The order caught Ethan off guard. Normally in situations like this, protocol dictated contacting maritime authorities and waiting for reinforcements. But something in Jensen's expression suggested that he saw something in the data the others hadn't yet noticed. Something that required immediate action. As Ethan grabbed his coat and flashlight, his mind tried to process the rapid shift in events. In a matter of minutes, his routine monitoring shift had turned into something entirely different. Alex quickly checked the batteries in the portable radios, while Jensen made a brief call to Ellie, the on-duty engineer, instructing her to join the team at the pier. The group assembled quickly, equipping themselves with the necessary gear for a nighttime inspection. Through the station's windows, they could see the dark shape of the mysterious vessel drawing closer to the coast, its silhouette becoming more defined against the Arctic horizon. Whatever was aboard that ship, they were about to find out. The vessel slowly revealed itself as the team approached along the pier. It was a disconcerting sight, a ship that defied simple categorization, too large to be an ordinary fishing boat, yet not quite the size of a commercial cargo ship, with its peculiar structure that seemed to tell two contradictory stories. The outer surface was covered by a thick layer of ice and rust, suggesting a long period of abandonment in the Arctic waters, but the faint tremor of the hull and the noticeable warmth emanating from the engines indicated recent activity. Jensen led the group to the access ladder, his cautious movements reflecting years of experience in uncertain situations. The metal of the ladder was slippery with a mix of ice and seawater, forcing them to climb with extreme care. When they reached the deck, the absence of crew members became even more unsettling. Under normal circumstances, even on ships with problems, some crew member would be visible, especially with an inspection team approaching. The deck was deserted, the navigation lights flickering irregularly, and the Arctic wind whistled through exposed metal structures. "Stay close," Jensen ordered, his voice low but firm. "Ellie, check the ship's vital systems. Alex, monitor communications. Ethan, with me." The team moved with professional precision, although an odd tension hung in the cold air. The first stop was the bridge. The door was unlocked, swaying slightly with the ship's movement. Inside, the scene was strange. The navigation instruments were still operational, lights flashing in seemingly random sequences. Maps and nautical charts were scattered across surfaces, some marked with incomprehensible annotations. A half-full cup of coffee still sat on the main panel, its contents frozen, as if time had suddenly stopped. Descending to the next level, they found the communications room. Alex immediately moved toward the equipment, trying to understand why they hadn't responded to the station's calls. "The systems are working," he muttered, perplexed. "They're just not being operated." The cafeteria was the next area to be investigated, and there the signs of a sudden abandonment were even more evident. Plates with partially eaten meals sat on the tables, some still with utensils stuck in food now frozen. Chairs were tipped over, as if people had gotten up in a hurry. A tablet was still on one of the tables, its battery almost dead, displaying a news page from 3 days ago. Ellie returned from her inspection of the ship's systems with a worried expression. The engines are running on autopilot, but someone programmed them to keep only the minimum necessary running. The fuel is half full. There's enough power for a few more days. It was then that they found the ship's logbook lying near one of the tables. Ellie picked it up, her gloved hands carefully flipping through the pages. "It's in English," she announced, her voice trembling slightly. The last entry was 3 days ago. The team gathered around her as she read the last written words, each one heavy with a dark weight. "Quarantine protocols failing. Increased aggression. Not human. Containment compromised. We're abandoning the ship. God help us." The silence that followed was terrifying. Jensen took the logbook from Ellie's hands and examined the previous pages, searching for more information. The entries from the previous days were routine. Navigation reports, maintenance logs, crew shifts. Then, about a week before, the notes started to change. Mentions of irregular behavior and incidents in the hold began to appear. The last pages were stained, and some words were nearly illegible, written in a rush. The discovery of the logbook completely changed the tone of the investigation. What had started as a routine inspection of a suspicious ship had turned into something much more sinister. The evidence pointed to a catastrophic event that had forced the crew to abandon the ship. But where were the lifeboats? Why were there no distress signals? And more importantly, what was this containment mentioned in the last entry? As they processed this information, a muffled sound echoed from deep within the ship. A distinct thud, like something heavy moving in the lower levels. The four of them exchanged looks, with the same unspoken question in their eyes. What exactly was contained in the hold of this abandoned ship? The sound reverberated again through the ship's metallic corridors, louder this time, as if something were approaching. Jensen made a silent gesture, guiding the team toward the stairs leading to the hold. The air grew progressively denser as they descended, heavy with a strange odor, a mix of sea breeze, oxidized metal, and something else, something chemical and unpleasant. The stairs ended in a dimly lit corridor. The emergency lights flickered irregularly, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. Ethan kept his flashlight steady, though his hands were trembling slightly. The beam of light revealed disturbing marks on the walls, deep scratches in the metal, as if something with extraordinary strength had tried to carve its way through the ship's structure. Alex consulted the emergency map on the wall. "The main hold should be this way," he whispered, pointing to a hallway on the right. The temperature seemed to drop with every step they took, their breaths forming small clouds in the air. The smell grew stronger, and now they could identify another element in the mix, the unmistakable metallic scent of blood. As they turned a corner, they came upon an area that seemed to have been transformed into an improvised lab. Stainless steel tables were arranged in rows, covered with medical and scientific equipment, many of which appeared to have been damaged in some kind of confrontation. Papers were scattered across the floor, some stained with dark substances that no one wanted to examine any closer. It was Ellie who found the cages. They were sturdy, reinforced metal structures, clearly designed to contain something extremely large and strong. All of them were destroyed, the bars bent outward as if they were made of wire. Nearby, there was a large crate with the words "Containment Level 5" painted in bold black letters. The lid was partially open, and the inside was empty. "We shouldn't be here," Ellie murmured, her voice visibly trembling as she took a step back. The air felt heavier with every passing second, as if something invisible was pressing against their chests. Jensen started to say something, but his words were interrupted by a sound. A wet, slithering noise coming from the shadows beyond the reach of their flashlights. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the sound of their hearts pounding in shallow breaths. Then, something moved in the darkness. At first it seemed like just another shadow, but as it neared the light, its shape became clearer. And it was something that defied all logic and understanding. The creature that emerged was vaguely humanoid in its basic form, but any resemblance to a human being ended there. Its skin was a sickly white and had an almost translucent quality, with dark veins visible through the surface. It was impossibly thin, with limbs far too long for its torso, ending in elongated fingers with extra joints. But it was its eyes that captured and held their gaze, too large for its face, completely black and empty, yet unmistakably intelligent. Its movements were rapid, as if each joint moved independently of the others, at angles that no living being should be able to reach. The creature tilted its head at an impossible angle, studying the group with a predatory curiosity that sent shivers down everyone's spine. For a moment that felt like an eternity, no one moved. The creature watched them, and they, paralyzed by fear and disbelief, watched it back. Then, it opened what must have been its mouth, a slit that expanded far beyond what any human jaw would allow, and emitted a sound none of them would ever forget. It was a horrific hissing that seemed to contain echoes of distorted human voices, as if it were trying to imitate something it had heard. It was that sound that broke the spell. "Run!" Ethan's scream echoed through the hold, and in that instant, the creature lunged toward them with impressive speed. Its movements were fluid and precise, in complete contrast to its chaotic appearance. The group instinctively scattered. Ellie managed to lock herself in a nearby compartment, while Ethan and Alex ran toward the deck. The last thing they saw before leaving the hold was the creature climbing the walls as if defying gravity, its limbs contorting in ways their minds refused to fully process what it was. The sound of its claws scratching the metal followed them up the stairs, along with that hissing which now seemed to contain something terrifyingly close to a laugh. Breathing heavily and trembling, Ethan and Alex reached the upper deck, the freezing Arctic air burning their lungs. The sound of the creature's footsteps still echoed through the ship's structure, but now it seemed to come from several directions simultaneously, as if it were everywhere at once. Ellie was safe, at least for now, locked in one of the storage compartments, but they knew they had to act fast. "We have to bring it back and deal with this!" Alex shouted, his voice hoarse from fear and exhaustion. He was right. They couldn't just abandon the ship with that thing on board. If it escaped, the consequences would be too dire. The problem was how to contain something that had clearly defeated an entire crew and escaped from cages designed specifically to hold it. Ethan forced his mind to work. ignoring the panic threatening to take over. The ship was large, but not infinite. There were emergency containment systems, like all modern vessels had. If they could lure the creature to a specific section of the ship and isolate it, maybe they'd have a chance. Through the radio, they made contact with Ellie. Her voice trembled, but her reasoning remained clear. The lower compartments can be sealed and flooded independently, she explained. If we can get it there, we can activate the emergency containment system. It was a risky plan, but it was the best they had. They quickly started gathering everything that might be useful. They found extra flashlights in an emergency cabinet, a fire extinguisher that could serve as an improvised weapon, and more importantly, a distress flare. The intense light and noise might be useful in directing the creature. Ellie used her knowledge of the ship's systems to guide them over the radio. There's a control panel on the intermediate level, she instructed. I can remotely access the emergency commands from here, but you need to make sure all the watertight doors are ready to seal. The plan started to take shape. Alex would be the bait, using the flare gun to draw the creature's attention. Ethan would be positioned strategically to close the doors as the creature advanced, guiding it to the containment area. It was a deadly game of cat and mouse, where one mistake would mean certain death. With trembling hands, Alex loaded the flare gun. The first shot lit up the corridor with a bright red light, the blast echoing through the metal structure. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, they heard that familiar hiss, closer than they had expected. The creature appeared at the end of the corridor, its movements faster and more aggressive now. Alex fired again, this time aiming near the creature. It reacted instantly, retreating from the bright light. That was the confirmation they needed. The thing was sensitive to intense light. The choreographed movement began, with Alex firing the flare gun strategically, guiding the creature along the planned route. Ethan ran from panel to panel, closing watertight doors as Alex and the creature passed. The metallic sound of the doors slamming shut echoed through the ship, creating a terrifying symphony alongside the creature's shrieks and the flare gun's shots. Each time a door closed, their escape options diminished. Finally, they managed to corner the creature in the designated section. Alex made his last move, tossing the still-active flare gun into the compartment. The creature instinctively followed the light, exactly as they had hoped. At that critical moment, Ethan triggered the final command. The deafening metallic clang of the last containment door slamming shut was all they heard. For a moment, they could hear the creature thrashing against the metal, its frustrated cries reverberating through the ship's structure. Ellie, still on the radio, confirmed that the seals were secure and began the flooding sequence. The sound of water flooding the lower compartments was the last they heard from the creature. Its screams and scratching were gradually drowned out by the roar of the freezing Arctic waters filling the spaces. Exhausted and still trembling, the three of them gathered again on the upper deck, barely believing they had survived. As they waited in the lifeboat, watching the ship from a safe distance, they knew the night wasn't over yet. They needed professional help to deal with the situation, and fast. Ellie did the calculations. Even with the compartments flooded, the creature would probably survive for some time. The freezing water would slow it down, but not kill it. It was containment, not elimination. At dawn, the helicopters arrived. They were black machines, unmarked. The station's team watched, exhausted and still in shock, as men in dark uniforms descended on ropes, their synchronized movements revealing years of specialized training. There were no formal introductions. The agents moved with silent efficiency, establishing a perimeter around the ship and setting up equipment that seemed to come from secret military facilities. They all wore state-of-the-art biological containment suits, with autonomous breathing systems and sensors that blinked constantly. One of the agents, seemingly the leader, approached Ethan. His face was partially hidden by a tactical mask, but his eyes conveyed a clear message. "This is not your problem," he said, his voice modulated through the communication system of the suit. "You weren't here. It didn't happen." It wasn't a request. It was a direct order, backed by an authority that transcended normal hierarchies. In the days that followed, the research station was systematically dismantled. Official orders came, relocating the entire team to different facilities around the world. There were no explanations, only documents with government stamps and confidentiality clauses that seemed endless. Jensen was sent to a weather station in the South Pacific. Alex was transferred to a communications center in the Australian desert. Ellie disappeared completely. Her name vanished from official records as if she had never existed. As for Ethan, he was assigned to a small monitoring facility on the coast of Chile. But the memories of that night haunted him. In his dreams, he could still hear that terrifying hiss, see those empty eyes that contained an impressive alien intelligence. Sometimes, during his long hours of monitoring, he found himself searching for signs, unidentified ships, strange movement patterns, anything that could indicate that it was happening again. Because Ethan knew a truth that consumed him. The creature had not been destroyed. Their plan had only worked partially. They had contained it, but containment was not the solution. Somewhere, in some secret facility, that thing still existed. And if it had escaped once, it could escape again. On particularly quiet nights, when the waves gently beat against the pillars of the Chilean station, Ethan wondered how many other mysterious ships were sailing the world's oceans, carrying similar secrets in their holds. How many other creatures waited in the depths, watching, learning, adapting. And mostly he wondered when, not if, but when, he would encounter those empty eyes again. Occasionally, reports crossed his desk. Unexplained incidents in deep waters, missing ships, and interrupted communications. Most were filed away as routine accidents or equipment failures. The only thing Ethan was sure of was that it wasn't over. It was just the beginning of something bigger, something that hid in the shadows of civilization, waiting for the right moment to emerge again. And when that moment came, he would be ready. Or at least, that's what he told himself during the long nights of vigil, while the monitors blinked silently and the ocean kept its secrets in the cold depths.